Buenos dias, buenas tardes, y buenas noches, bonjour, bonsoir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be. Jay Slater case. And it is Monday, 11th of May. So later today, if all goes well, no promises, if all goes well, we should have a delayed Sunday roast because a lot of stuff has been put out there lately that needs to be roasted. And it may well be that Welsh lamb is back on the roast menu. But also the Gossip Corner, where remember I turned the cap on backwards, and it's not going to be totally focused on Jay Slater, but on some of those accident group trolls and goons that say some of the most absurd things. So it could be a busy Monday. I want to focus on two things today. I want to focus on the notion that Debbie Duncan knew Jay so very well. And I question this because in that recent ITV This Morning show, Debbie questioned people like me, people like you. She said they didn't know Jay. Well, to be honest, knowing a person isn't a question of knowing them or not knowing them. It's not a zero-sum game where you either know someone 100% or you don't know them at all. I mean, there is that middle ground. So it comes down to how well did you know someone? Not 100%, not 0%. And what I would question here is Debbie's notion that we, the commenters out there, didn't know things about Jay at all. And I would also question that she knew everything about Jay. Either she didn't know everything about Jay and she's in denial, or she did know everything about Jay and, she approves of it. I don't know which way round it is. So to what extent did Debbie Duncan know Jay? Question of the day. But also, we need to focus on the toxins, the substances that Jay was taking, because in the toxicology report, we heard about the cat from the Spanish autopsy crew. We heard about the MDMA. We heard about the cocaine. We heard about all that. We didn't hear about the laughing gas, the nitrous oxide, or whatever it was in balloons. And I think that's because, I don't know, I'm not a scientist. I think it's because the residue of that doesn't last in the body very long. I don't know that it's something that can be traced in an autopsy. But we need to think about it because it can have a very, very serious effect on people that take it. Now, there is that social media post out there, a photo, a pic of Jay. It looks like a few years younger than when he went to Tenerife. I think he's standing with one or two mates. They have balloons, and it looks like Jay was doing balloons. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, teenagers don't tend to carry around a balloon if it's party time. I think they're doing balloons. And we've also got to remember, was it not Brandon that said that when he saw Jay later on in that evening or that nighttime, that Jay was standing outside Sugar Reef doing balloons? Brandon was quite specific. He didn't see him inside. He said, I believe, he saw Jay outside doing balloons. So, to add to that cocktail of substances that was in Jay, I think we need to entertain the idea that Brandon's right about that, and that some other substance was floating around in Jay's system that no doubt impaired his judgment and many other things. I'm now appealing to Debbie Duncan to get on board with this campaign. There is a campaign out there to make it aware to parents in particular how dangerous these balloons, nitrous oxide and butane can be. And for that, I'm going to turn to an article. I will put the link to this article in the description of the video, and you can read it at your leisure. But it comes from, and thank you to an eagle-eyed commenter that saw this and passed it on to me, it comes from Wales Today. So you'd have thought, people like Ivor Lovelace, that are very concerned about what's happening in the Principality, would be also concerned with this article in Wales Today. Let's have a quick look at it. The headline is, and it comes from May the 2nd, 2026, so not that long ago, Mum discovered son had died from laughing gas tragedy after seeing Facebook post. I went onto Facebook and someone had written R.I.P. John Cain. So I guess the son was John Cain, and this poor mother discovered that he had died doing balloons. from Facebook, of all things. A mother who learned of her teenage son's death when she saw RIP posted on his Facebook page has spoken of the stark warnings she now gives to young people she sees inhaling gas from balloons in the street. Let me pause there. This is where I think Debbie Duncan could join forces with Emma, I think her name is Emma Cain, and really make a change for good here and campaign against these balloons and these people that are supplying the balloons and the gas to the youngsters. Emma Cain's son, John, was 17 when he suffered a fatal cardiac arrest in 2011 after inhaling butane, having experimented with the substance for only a few weeks. On the day he died, his friends had bought 8 canisters of lighter fluid in a single transaction. 15 years on, the mother of 5 is determined to confront what she sees as a growing national problem, the rising use of solvents and nitrous oxide, both classified as Class C drugs. She now urges parents to recognise the risks and to speak openly with their children about the harm these substances can cause, the Mirror reports. And this is exactly what I would love Debbie Duncan to do, to speak openly. Not only with their children, but to society at home. Debbie Duncan has a platform now. She's well known. She's been on the media. How about she pivots to say, I want to use my influence to discourage kids from doing this kind of thing? Will she do that? Don't hold your breath. Where do we go from here? An inquest last year found... I've lost my place. There it is. An inquest last year found that Amy Louise Leonard, 20, from Bolton, there we go, that's up in Lancs, she died in tragically similar circumstances to John after inhaling laughing gas. Amy had shared a Facebook message urging young people to put down their balloons just days before her death, describing how repeated abuse had left her temporarily unable to walk. Now, temporarily unable to walk, you know, we've heard so much about Jay going down a ravine and he fell off a mountain. All I'm saying is the words temporarily unable to walk make me think you could reach a stage doing these balloons where your walking is severely impaired. Your judgment is severely impaired. Who's to say Jay did not do one of these balloons just before he headed out of the Airbnb? We don't know. I don't think Debbie knows, and yet she doesn't want to talk about this. Why is that? Emma told the Mirror how irate she becomes when she sees discarded gas canisters littered around town and city centres, reminding her of her son's death. I get angry. I came out of my son Joshua's flat a few weeks ago, and as I walked past the green area where they put their rubbish, I didn't count them, but there was a good 7 or 8 canisters put there for rubbish, and it just makes me so angry. I wonder how angry Debbie Duncan gets when she hears this kind of story about her neighbourhood. It was early in the morning. I was getting my youngsters ready for school when the police called me. They said that something had happened. Obviously didn't say over the phone that they were sending some officers to see me. She said when recalling the devastating moment in 2011, she learned that what had happened to her son. When I came off the phone, I just threw it on the sofa. A few seconds later, I picked it up and went on to John's profile on Facebook, and someone had written R.I.P. John Cain. That's how I found out, and then the police came and told me what had happened. I remember collapsing to the floor and being picked up. Then the police came, they took me into the living room, my sister made me a sweet cup of tea, and then took my little ones to school for me. John was an amazing boy who would throw himself halfway across the room just to make his brothers laugh, his mum described. Age 15, he was placed into care for behavioural issues, she added, citing how he was easily influenced by his peers. I mean, this sounds so familiar to me. Was it not Jay that was so sociable, so social, he would talk to anyone, and yet I do think easily influenced by his peers? There does seem to be a pattern here. Now, Emma believes her son had an undiagnosed disorder such as ADHD or autism, conditions which were not as understood at the time. There are days I will just sit there and I will just burst into tears, she said, explaining the grief she lives with. And there's days when I'm okay. Sometimes I feel guilty for being okay. But I know he doesn't want me to be miserable. He doesn't want me to be upset every day. And I just try and do what I can to make him proud because I believe he's living through me now. And I would say, I think Debbie Duncan would feel the same. I think she would feel that Jay's memory would make her feel proud if she did something like this rather than try to shut people up from talking about the subject. We're talking about the subject now. Is that a bad thing? No, I think it's a good thing. So, Debbie Duncan, please get on board with these campaigns to make people aware of the drugs that Jay took are really, really bad. It's that simple. The article concludes, the tragedy has also left its mark on John's 4 siblings, some of whom were young when he died. It's not just obviously the parents that lose someone, it affects their friends, it affects their siblings, she explained. John was Joshua's hero, he was his idol, and he had to deal with a lot due to the loss of his brother. Working with organisations like Achievement Through Football, ATF. Now, this is good because we had Debbie and Warren, didn't we mention a football match? Maybe they are aware of this Achievement Through Football group. I don't know. But working with organisations like Achievement Through Football, Emma speaks with children at risk of falling into antisocial behaviour and substance abuse, and those who have been repeatedly excluded from school. There we go. So, as I say, that, I think, Emma Cain is her name. That would be a wonderful person for Debbie Duncan or Warren or Zach to reach out to and say, we have obviously been through a similar experience. We haven't highlighted it in social media world, but we do think with our influence that we could help you. And in turn, that would mean help these poor youngsters that do this kind of stuff, which, by the way, is not normal. We keep being told normal behavior, normal boy, normal holiday in Tenerife. It is not. I can assure you, when you look globally at the youth of today, the vast, vast majority would never think of touching these substances that Jay indulged in. I mean, in so many cases, if we're talking globally, in the world, so many cases, people don't have access to that. They don't have the time. They're, as young people, they're doing what they can to put food on the table and help the family and babysit and clean up. They don't have the time, or they're working hard to further themselves either in a trade or in education. They don't have the time, the will. It's not something that they indulge in. And I would also add that those that do either have a lot of spare cash around or they have a lot of spare time around. And I think it is abnormal to look at that situation and say, well, what else are they going to do? You know, got time in your hands, you got enough money to buy a Moncler jacket. What else are you going to do? This is not a normal world. And my problem here is the likes of Sarah Smith don't seem to focus on this and say this is the heart of the problem. The elephant in the room, I think, is what Scoob said in one of her pieces. The elephant in the room, surely, is this narco background that has resulted, yes, it has resulted in the death of Jay Slater. I will never, ever come to the conclusion that Jay Slater, absolutely clear-headed, went down a ravine and fell off and died. And I think most of you are like that. We will never be convinced of that. Some of us think it could well have been an accident of sorts. But as Sally Titanic has pointed out, even an accident has causes. And what is distressing in this case, and it's why some of us will continue forever until we get some decent answers, what is really distressing is that it seems like those closest to Jay have no interest in the causes of what happened to Jay. And that's what I don't get. I would have thought it'd be the other way around. I would have thought those that are closest to Jay would be the most frustrated by the lack of answers about what happened to him. I said this on Jan's Views Live last night. What happened to Jay is a completely separate issue to how Jay died. The two overlap, because if you find out what happened to Jay, you will also find out at the end of that cause and effect how he died. But just saying, oh, his body was found here, that's at the bottom of a ravine, therefore he must have died by falling into it, that isn't doing anything to find out what happened to Jay. And if we found out what happened to Jay, we might have a chance of finding out how to avoid the same thing happening to other people. I know I don't. I shouldn't have to explain this to people like the Accident Group or Ivor Lovelace or Debbie Duncan, but clearly I do. So I'll do it one more time. In order to find out what happened to Jay, you have to know, minute by minute, what he did and where he was. And his friends and associates, they all know that. They can tell us, and they have told Luggy. It's just that Luggy won't tell the world. And I believe Luggy and Debbie Duncan know what happened to Jay. They just won't tell the world. That is the cover-up. But what is the cover-up covering up? All right, let's leave it there. I will put a link to that article. Read it. And one more time, Debbie Duncan, please join forces with this Emma Cain lady. Debbie, you could be a force for good. Hasta luego, adios. See you next time.